was late afternoon when the sun began to dip behind the rugged cliffs of the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and crimson. Dust swirled gently in the warm breeze, and the only sound breaking the silence was the creak of saddle leather as a cowboy rode his horse along a narrow trail. His name was Thomas Hale, a man known in the small frontier towns not for his wealth or fame, but for his quiet strength and the code he lived by. Help where help is needed, even if it costs you. Thomas had spent years drifting from ranch to ranch, earning his keep by breaking horses, driving cattle, and guarding wagon trains. His life was not one of luxury, but one of grit and survival. His horse, a strong bay stallion named Redfire, was more than just an animal to him. That horse was his lifeline. In the desolate stretches of the desert, Redfire carried him to water, food, and shelter. Without him, survival was nearly impossible. As Thomas rode that evening, scanning the horizon for a place to camp, his sharp eyes caught sight of something unusual near a cluster of mesquite trees. At first, it looked like a bundle of discarded clothes, but as he drew closer, his heart clenched. It was a woman. She lay slumped against the dry earth, her skin pale beneath streaks of blood. Her clothing and beads revealed her identity. An Apache woman, barely conscious, her body marked by wounds that told of violence and struggle. For a long moment, Thomas just sat in his saddle, staring. He knew the risks. Helping an Apache meant crossing a line most cowboys never dared to. Tensions between settlers and Apache warriors were high, and any cowboy caught aiding them could be branded a traitor, or worse, hunted down. Yet as Thomas dismounted and knelt beside her, he saw the faint rise and fall of her chest, the fragile thread of life still clinging to her. He could not ignore it. The woman tried to speak, her lips trembling, but no words came. Thomas placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "Save your strength," he whispered. Looking at Redfire, then back at the woman, he felt a weight settle on his heart. He only had one horse. Without Redfire, he could not carry her to safety, and if he tried to take her on foot, both would perish. The choice was brutal, his survival or hers. Thomas loosened the reins, stroked Redfire's mane one last time, and tied his canteen to the saddle horn. He lifted the Apache woman with careful strength, laying her across Redfire's back. The horse snorted softly as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Thomas patted his neck. "Take care of her, boy." With that, he gave the stallion a firm slap, and Redfire carried the woman away toward the nearest Apache territory, leaving Thomas alone in the vast desert. Night fell quickly. The desert grew cold, and Thomas huddled against a rock for warmth, his body trembling from fatigue and hunger. He knew he had given up his only chance of making it back to town alive. Still, as he looked up at the starlit sky, a quiet peace filled his chest. He had done what was right, even if it cost him everything. Sleep took him with that thought. The next morning, Thomas awoke to the sound of distant hoofbeats. At first, he thought it was a dream, but soon the ground itself began to tremble. Rising slowly, shielding his eyes from the sun, he saw a sight that made his breath catch. From beyond the ridge, a line of warriors emerged. Apache horsemen, nearly 70 strong, riding in tight formation. Their faces were painted, their weapons gleamed in the light, and at their front rode Redfire, carrying the same woman he had saved, now sitting upright and alert, though still weak. The warriors circled Thomas where he stood, unarmed and weary. He did not move. He expected anger, suspicion, perhaps even death. One wrong move, and he would be cut down. But instead, silence filled the air. The woman spoke in her native tongue, her voice soft but commanding. Then an elder warrior dismounted and approached Thomas. The old man's face was weathered like the desert stone, but his eyes burned with a fire of gratitude. He placed a hand over his heart, then extended it toward Thomas. Through broken English, he said, "You give life. Apache never forget." Thomas swallowed hard, unable to reply. The elder signaled, and suddenly, the circle of warriors broke. To Thomas's astonishment, they brought forward a second horse, a strong black Mustang with reins braided in leather. The elder handed the reins to him, a gesture of trust and respect. The woman, now seated safely among her people, gazed at Thomas with gratitude shining in her eyes. That day, Thomas rode out of the desert not as a lone cowboy, but as a man bound by honor to a people who had once been strangers, now allies. The Apaches escorted him to the edge of their land, ensuring his safe passage. And though they parted ways, he knew he had been given something more valuable than gold or cattle. He had been given their trust. Years later, when Thomas sat by a fire telling the tale to wide-eyed children on a ranch porch, he never spoke of fear or of what he almost lost. Instead, he spoke of the power of one choice, the choice to put humanity above division, to offer kindness when it was hardest to give. The story of the cowboy and the Apache woman became a quiet legend passed through whispers across towns and camps. Some doubted its truth, but those who believed carried the message in their hearts. That even in the harshest times, when distrust and hatred threatened to divide, a single act of compassion could change the course of lives, binding enemies into unexpected friends. And so, Thomas Hale's name lived on, not in records or newspapers, but in the silent gratitude of a people who once rode 70 strong into the desert, not to seek vengeance, but to honor the man who gave everything he had, including his only horse, to save one of their own. The desert winds still carry his story, reminding those who hear it that true courage is not in drawing a gun or winning a battle, but in choosing sacrifice, even when the world says otherwise. That is the legacy of the cowboy who chose humanity over himself, and in doing so, found a brotherhood he never expected. In the end, the story of Thomas Hale is not about a cowboy or an Apache woman. Alone, it is about the timeless power of compassion. In a land where survival often demanded selfishness, Thomas chose the harder path, to give away his only chance of safety so that a wounded stranger might live. What he received in return was far greater than a horse or protection. He earned trust, respect, and a bond that crossed cultural lines in an age when such unity was rare. His sacrifice proved that humanity has no borders, and kindness speaks a language stronger than fear or hate. The legend of Thomas reminds us that even the smallest act of selflessness can ripple outward, shaping lives and bridging divides we thought could never be crossed. And as the desert winds still whisper his tale, we are left with one powerful truth. When we choose to act with courage and compassion, we may not only save a life, but also plant the seeds of peace that grow far beyond our own